There is a photograph from June 6, 2026. It was taken in the Plaza de la Armeria of the Royal Palace in Madrid, in the middle of the afternoon, under Spanish summer light. In it, Princess Leonor of Asturias stands with her family, King Felipe, Queen Letizia, Infanta Sofia, and faces a man in white robes. The man is Pope Leo XIV. He arrived that day from Rome, landing at Adolfo Suárez Airport, traveling directly to the palace where a 21-gun salute and the national anthems of Spain and the Vatican were played in his honor. He was received with the full ceremonial weight that two ancient institutions, the Spanish crown and the Holy See, deploy when they meet each other in public. The photograph is official. The meeting is documented. Everything about it is, in the strict factual sense, visible. And yet, what that meeting actually contained, the weight of 500 years of shared history between the Spanish throne and the papacy, the parallel crises of legitimacy that both the Church and the monarchy are navigating simultaneously, the quiet and precise way that a 20-year-old future queen used every choice available to her that afternoon to say something about who she intends to be, none of that is in the official record. None of that is in the palace communications. None of that is in the caption under the photograph. This is what was in the room. The last time Leonor stood before a pope, she was wearing a floral dress and ballet flats. She and Sofia were children, matching outfits, the particular careful coordination that parents apply to formal occasions involving very young children, the kind of photograph that says, above all, that these are little girls at an important event who have been dressed appropriately for it. Pope Benedict XVI. The photograph from that day is widely circulated in Spanish royal history archives. It is, in every visible way, a picture of children. The photograph from June 6, 2026 is not a picture of children. Leonor wore black. A midi dress with long sleeves and a modest V neckline, a wide leather belt at the waist adding structure to the silhouette. Black stiletto pumps. Minimal jewelry, almost none, with the deliberate exception of her earrings, about which more in a moment. Her hair loose, in soft waves, in what royal commentators noted was a quality of natural ease that sat in precise contrast to the institutional formality of everything surrounding her. She did not wear a mantilla. This is a small detail that is also, in the specific context of Spain's relationship with the papacy, not a small detail at all. The mantilla, the traditional black or white lace veil, has been worn by Spanish royal women before popes for generations. It is not required. It has never been required. But it has been, for most of that history, the expected choice, the gesture that said, in this encounter, tradition governs. In this encounter, what was done before will be done again. Leonor and Sofia both chose differently. The decision was described by royal commentators as deliberate, fully consistent with current Vatican protocol, and reflective of what was called a more contemporary interpretation of royal tradition. The palace made no official statement about it. They didn't need to. The choice made the statement for them. In the most formally religious, most institutionally weighted meeting of Leonor's young adult life as heir to the Spanish throne, she stood before the head of the Roman Catholic Church and said, through what she was and wasn't wearing, I respect this. I am not bound by all of its historical forms. That is not nothing. That is, quietly, everything. But before we can understand what that choice means, we need to understand who she was standing in front of. Because Pope Leo XIV is not a figure who arrived in Madrid trailing centuries of familiar institutional weight. He is, in the history of the papacy, something new. Robert Francis Prevost was elected pope in May 2025. He is the first American to hold the office in the 2,000-year history of the Roman Catholic Church. He is a member of the Order of St. Augustine, a mendicant order, one built on the principle of poverty, community, and service to the poor, and his papacy has been defined, in its first year, by a specific and pointed emphasis on what he calls the Church of the Poor. His first apostolic journey after Spain was Africa, where migration and poverty are the central pastoral concerns. He came to Spain with an explicit agenda, to address the immigration crisis, to promote what he called reconciliation between the different forces of this nation, to visit a homeless shelter in Madrid, to go inside a prison in Barcelona, to travel to the Canary Islands, Spain's migration hotspot, where boats arriving from West Africa land in numbers that have defined the country's political debate for years. He is, in other words, a pope who chose the margins over the center. Who arrived in Madrid not primarily to reinforce institutional ties with the Spanish crown, though that is part of what happened, but to put the weight of the papacy on the side of people who do not have palaces or 21-gun salutes. He celebrated Mass in the Plaza de Cibeles for hundreds of thousands of people. He met with 40 people with long-term illness and disability at the nunciature. He hugged a boy. He took a selfie with migrants at a Caritas shelter. This is who Leonor met in the throne room of the royal palace on June 6, 2026. And the meeting matters, in its full depth, only when you understand what each of them represents in the year it took place. Spain's relationship with the papacy is not a diplomatic relationship. It is a 500-year entanglement that has shaped everything about the country, its language, its architecture, its presence on 3 continents, its sense of its own identity and its own mission. Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon were known as the Catholic monarchs, a title granted by the papacy, not self-assumed. Their joint reign, which unified the kingdoms of the Iberian Peninsula, was conducted explicitly under the banner of Catholicism. The Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Moorish rule, was framed as a religious enterprise. The Inquisition, which Isabella established in 1478 with papal approval, operated in Spain for over 3 centuries. The colonization of the Americas was carried out under papal blessing, with a papal document, the Intercatera of 1493, dividing the newly discovered lands between Spain and Portugal. For 5 centuries, the Spanish crown and the papacy were not 2 separate institutions conducting diplomatic relations. They were, functionally, partners in a joint civilizational project. The religion was the monarchy's legitimacy, and the monarchy was the religion's enforcement arm, and the two were so interwoven that separating them, when Spain became a democracy and a secular state after Franco, required a specific constitutional effort, a deliberate, formal separation of church and state that was itself an act of national self-redefinition. And here is what makes the June 6 meeting not just historically interesting but genuinely loaded for a future queen who has spent 3 years in military training and 5 months at sea and 1 morning flying solo in a PC-21 training aircraft. The Franco regime, which ended only in 1975, used the Catholic Church as one of its primary pillars of legitimacy. National Catholicism, the doctrine that Spanish identity was inseparable from Catholic faith, was the ideological foundation of a 40-year dictatorship. Juan Carlos I's restoration of democracy in 1975 required, among other things, a deliberate, careful dismantling of the state-religion model. Felipe VI has continued that process of separation, presiding over a monarchy that has become increasingly secular in its public presentation, in its institutional positioning, in the way it relates to the Church as one part of Spanish civil society rather than its defining center. Leonor is the next step in that evolution. And the choice she made, black dress, no mantilla, earrings from a flood-affected brand, is the clearest statement she has yet made about how she intends to continue it. About those earrings. They were original glass creations by a Spanish brand called Buara. Buara was one of the businesses affected by the Dana floods that devastated the Valencia region in late 2024, one of the worst natural disasters in Spain's modern history, a catastrophic flash flooding event that killed over 200 people, destroyed thousands of homes and businesses, and traumatized an entire region in a matter of hours. Queen Letizia was the first member of the Spanish royal family to wear Buara's designs, in December 2024, as a gesture of solidarity with the brand and the region. Leonor chose them for her audience with the Pope. In the most formally significant official appearance of her young institutional life, in the most deliberately observed outfit she has yet chosen, Leonor put the Valencia floods on her ears. She turned personal accessory into political act, in a setting where every detail would be photographed, catalogued, and analyzed. She did it without a statement. Without an explanation. Without a press release. She simply wore the earrings and let the room do the rest. This is a level of institutional sophistication that is worth marking. She is 20 years old. She has been heir presumptive for 20 years and actively preparing for the role for 3. But the decision to use a papal audience, an event that generates more royal coverage than almost anything outside a coronation, to carry a message about an ongoing humanitarian situation in her own country, through something as small and easily overlooked as a pair of earrings, is not a decision that comes from a training program. It comes from a person who understands, in a way that can't be taught, how institutional power actually communicates. Not through statements, through choices, through what you wear when the room is full of cameras and everyone is looking at everything. Pope Leo XIV stood in the throne room of the royal palace and spoke about reconciliation. He used that specific word, reconciliation, in a country that remains one of the most politically divided in Western Europe. A country where the memory of the Civil War still organizes family relationships. Where the question of Catalonia's place in the Spanish state has never been resolved. Where the left and right occupy positions on many issues that have no real equivalent in most neighboring democracies. Where the floods in Valencia became, almost immediately, a political battleground between the national government and the regional government, each blaming the other for the speed and adequacy of the response. He said he came to promote reconciliation between the different forces of this nation. He said it in the throne room, in front of the king and queen. In front of the heir presumptive. In front of the woman who will one day be asked to be the living symbol of the unity he was, that afternoon, asking Spain to find. Leonor cannot speak about Catalonia. She cannot take a position on the national government's handling of the Valencia floods. She cannot advocate for reconciliation in the political sense, because a constitutional monarch who advocates for political positions has already broken the foundational rule of the role. She has to stand in rooms where those words are spoken and let them land without responding. But she can wear earrings. She can choose not to wear a mantilla. She can stand in the throne room in a black dress with a modern silhouette and minimal jewelry and demonstrate, through the sum total of every choice available to her in that setting, that the future Queen of Spain is not the Queen of Francisco Franco's Spain, is not the Queen of Isabel the Catholic Spain, is not the Queen of any historical Spain but the one she is standing in right now, with its floods and its divisions and its migrants arriving in the Canary Islands and its political arguments about who bears responsibility for all of it. That is what was in the room. That is what the photograph doesn't show. Two institutions, meeting in the persons of their newest representatives. The Catholic Church, under its first American Pope, reconfiguring itself around poverty and migration after years of scandal and institutional crisis that had cost it credibility, attendance, and the trust of a generation. The Spanish monarchy, under its future queen, reconfiguring itself around competence and modernity and groundedness after a generation of scandal and institutional crisis that had cost it credibility, approval, and the trust of its most politically active regions. Two ancient structures, both fighting for relevance in the same century, both looking for legitimacy in the same fractured world, meeting in a throne room in Madrid under summer light while a 21-gun salute sounded across the Plaza de la Armeria. Leo XIV is the first American pope. Leonor will be the first Spanish queen regnant since Isabella II, who lost her throne in 1868. They are both, in their respective institutions, doing something that hasn't been done before, navigating roles that have existed for centuries in forms that their predecessors could not have imagined. The last time Leonor stood before a pope she was wearing ballet flats and a floral dress and she was a child. The woman who stood before Pope Leo XIV on June 6, 2026 wore glass earrings from a brand that survived the Valencia floods, chose not to wear a veil that tradition expected, and stood in the throne room of her family's palace with the particular stillness of someone who knew exactly what room she was in and exactly what choices were available to her in it. She has crossed the Strait of Magellan. She has flown solo over the Spanish coast. She has done a military parachute jump that no member of her family, male or female, had ever done before her. She has sworn an oath to a constitution that doesn't fully guarantee her the throne she is preparing to inherit. And she stood in the throne room of the royal palace of Madrid and said, through everything she chose and everything she declined to choose, this is the queen I am becoming. Not the queen of 500 years ago. Not the queen of the mantilla and the matching floral dress. The queen of the glass earrings. The queen of the black dress and the modern silhouette and the quiet, precise, entirely deliberate message worn close to the face where everyone would see it. She is 20 years old. The meeting was 3 weeks ago. And the Spain that watched it, even the Spain that only saw the surface of it, the official photograph, the approved coverage, already knows it was in the presence of something it hasn't seen before. A future queen who knows exactly what she's doing. And has decided, finally, to let it show.